parents paid for my sister's dream wedding, then expected me to pay. Now they regret it. Hey everyone. This happened a few months ago, and honestly, I'm still trying to process it. I always knew my parents favored my sister. I'd spent my whole life watching them bend over backwards for her while I was expected to take care of myself. But what did they to me? This was next level. They threw her a lavish wedding, spared no expense, made it the event of the year. Then, out of nowhere, they handed me the bill. And when I refused to pay, they never expected what I'd do next. I should probably start with some background. I'm 32, and my sister Emma is 24. Growing up, my parents were always busy. They owned a successful healthcare firm and spent more time working than parenting. At least, that's what I thought. But then Emma came along, and suddenly, they weren't too busy at all. They doted on her, spoiled her, made her the center of their world. Meanwhile, I was, well, just there. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't neglected. I went to private schools and had everything I needed. But affection? Support? Any real interest in my life? That was reserved for Emma. By the time I was a teenager, it was clear. Emma could do no wrong. She wasn't expected to work hard or be responsible like I was. She partied through high school, barely passed her classes, and still got a cushy job at our parents' company, where she barely showed up. Meanwhile, I put myself through college, built my career from the ground up, and made something of myself without their help. And honestly, I was fine with that. I didn't need them. At least, that's what I told myself. But then, Emma got engaged. And suddenly, it was useful again. Her wedding was set to be huge, destination venue, designer dress, luxury, everything. My parents were thrilled. And for once, I actually thought, maybe this will bring us closer. Spoiler, it didn't. They barely included me in the planning. I wasn't invited to any discussions and was never asked for input. At first, I didn't care. But as the wedding got closer, I started noticing something weird. Whenever I asked about the budget, my parents changed the subject. Emma dodged questions about how much things were costing. And then, just weeks before the wedding, they invited me and my wife, Danielle, over for dinner. Which was strange, because in the entire time Danielle and I had been together, they had never once invited us over. I should have known something was up, but nothing could have prepared me for what they were about to say. The dinner started off awkward but normal. Polite small talk. Compliments about the food. Then, halfway through, my dad cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk about Emma's wedding expenses." I paused. Okay. Mom jumped in. We've had some unexpected financial troubles with the business. Some legal issues, nothing serious, but we need a little help. Danielle and I exchanged a look. What kind of help? I asked. Mom smiled like this was completely reasonable. We need you to cover the remaining costs of Emma's wedding. My fork clattered against my plate. Excuse me. It's not much, my dad added quickly. Just enough to get everything finalized. How much is not much? I asked, my stomach twisting. Mom waved a hand. Oh, just around $40,000. I nearly choked. 40,000? They had the nerve to look offended. Emma's wedding is important, my mom said, like I was being unreasonable. She deserves this, Alex, Dad added. Deserves? Like I was just supposed to hand over 40 grand for a wedding I wasn't even involved in? I looked at Danielle, waiting for her to jump in. But to my surprise, she just raised an eyebrow at me like she was waiting to see how I'd handle it. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't stepping in because she already knew what I was going to do. I smiled. Leaning back in my chair, I crossed my arms. Sure, I'll pay for Emma's wedding. My parents lit up. Emma squealed. But Danielle? She just smirked. Because she knew something they didn't. I had conditions. And my parents? They were about to regret asking me for anything. The second I said, sure, I'll pay for Emma's wedding, my parents practically collapsed with relief. Emma squealed, clapping her hands like a kid getting a new toy. Oh my God, Alex. You're the best. Mom reached across the table, squeezing my hand. We knew we could count on you, sweetheart. Dad nodded. This means so much to us. I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, the power was in my hands. Of course, I said, taking a sip of my drink. But I have a few conditions. The mood shifted instantly. Emma's smile faltered. Mom's hand tightened on mine. Conditions? Dad repeated, his voice suddenly cautious. Yeah, I said, leaning back. If I'm paying, I have some requests. Mom forced a laugh. Oh, Alex, this isn't about you. It's Emma's special day. Exactly, I agreed. So, as the one funding it, I should have a say, right? Silence. Emma frowned. Like what? I tapped my chin, pretending to think. First, I get to approve every vendor. Every single one. If I'm paying, I'm making sure I'm getting my money's worth. What? Emma shrieked. You can't just. Second, I continued, cutting her off, Danielle and I will be sitting at the head table, right next to you and your fiancé. My parents gasped. Emma looked like I had just slapped her. The head table? She screeched. That's for MY bridesmaids and closest friends. Oh, I see, I said, nodding. So, I'm good enough to fund your wedding but not good enough to sit near you? No one answered. Thought so, I said, smirking. And lastly, I let the moment drag out for effect. The wedding speeches? Danielle and I will be giving one. And we get full creative control. Emma's jaw dropped. Mom went pale. Dad's hand slammed onto the table. Absolutely not, he roared. I blinked. Then I'm not paying. Silence. I could practically hear their brains scrambling. They had no backup plan. No way to cover the cost without me. And they knew it. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Then, finally, my mom forced a smile. Sweetheart, she said carefully. We appreciate your offer, but we don't think those requests are reasonable. I shrugged. That's fine. Then I'm not paying. Emma exploded. You're ruining my wedding. She shrieked. No, I said calmly. I just think it's interesting that you expect me to drop 40 grand with zero say in anything. My dad tried a different approach. Son, you're financially stable. This isn't a big deal for you. I snorted. Oh, so because I make good money, that means I should just fund someone else's wedding? Mom sighed dramatically. Alex, this is what family does. We support each other. I tilted my head. Oh, like how you supported me with my wedding? Their faces froze. Because the truth? They didn't give me a single cent for my wedding. Not one. Danielle and I paid for everything ourselves. And suddenly, they had nothing to say. The room was tense. Emma was furious. My parents looked cornered. And me? I was having the time of my life. So, what's it gonna be? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Do I get a say, or am I keeping my 40 grand? Mom sighed. Let us think about it. I grinned. Take your time. Just don't take too long. Weddings are expensive. And with that, I stood up, took Danielle's hand, and walked out. Because this time, I was in control. The second we walked out of that house, Danielle burst out laughing. I cannot believe you just did that, she said, shaking her head. I smirked. Believe it. Because for once in my life, I had flipped the script on them. And now? They had no idea what to do. A few days passed. No calls. No texts. I figured they were scrambling, trying to figure out their next move. Then, finally, my mom called. Alex, sweetheart, we've talked it over, and we think we can meet you halfway. I leaned back, already knowing this was going to be good. Oh? Do tell. You can approve the vendors and give a speech, she said. And the head table? I asked. Silence. Then she sighed. Sweetie, you don't really want to sit there, do you? You and Danielle will be more comfortable at a regular table. I almost laughed. Oh, I see. So I'm good enough to fund the wedding, but not good enough to be seated near the bride. It's just tradition. Then you can pay for it traditionally. Without me. Silence. Then, finally, she cracked. Fine. You can sit at the head table. I grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. But before I could hang up, she added something else. Just promise me you won't say anything negative in your speech. I smiled. Oh, don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure it's memorable. She didn't like the sound of that. But at this point, she couldn't afford to argue. Fast forward to the wedding. Everything was over the top. Luxury venue. Custom floral arrangements. Insanely expensive food. And me? I was sitting front and center. Right next to the bride, just like I promised. Emma was barely speaking to me, but I didn't care. Because the best part of the night hadn't even happened yet. Finally, it was time for the speeches. Emma's maid of honor went first, sweet, emotional, predictable. Then, it was my turn. I took the mic, smiling at the guests. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Alex, the bride's older brother. And also I turned to Emma, raising my glass. Her generous, last-minute financial sponsor. Gasps. Laughter. Emma's face turned red. But I wasn't done. Now, when our parents first asked me to fund this wedding, I had some concerns. Mostly, I wouldn't have a say in the planning. But thankfully, we all reached a fair agreement. I turned to my parents. Right, Mom? Dad? They looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. The guests whispered. People leaned in. Because suddenly, this speech wasn't going the way they expected. And I was just getting started. The room was silent. All eyes were on me. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear. My parents were frozen, their polite smiles barely holding up. And me? I had never felt better. I took a slow sip of my drink, enjoying the tension, then continued. When I first agreed to pay for this wedding, I thought, hey, maybe this is my chance to finally be included in something important. I paused, looking around the room. Turns out, I was only included when it was time to swipe a credit card. A few guests laughed uncomfortably. Others? They whispered. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a regular wedding speech. This was exposure. My mom shot me a look. The same one she used to give me as a kid when I was embarrassing her in front of guests. But this time, I didn't care. I smiled, raising my glass. Emma, I want to congratulate you on finding someone who loves you enough to put up with you. A few people chuckled. Even Emma's new husband gave a nervous laugh. Because, trust me, I know firsthand how difficult that can be. Emma's jaw tightened. Mom whispered something to Dad, who was now rubbing his temples like this was physically hurting him. But I wasn't done. No, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll leave you all with a heartfelt message. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, thank you for teaching me such an important life lesson. They looked at me, confused. So did Emma. The whole room was waiting. You taught me that in this family, money is the only thing that truly matters. And for that, I am forever grateful. Silence. Then, gasps. Someone in the back whistled. Emma's hand slammed onto the table. Are you kidding me, Alex? She shrieked. Mom stood up. Dad's face turned bright red. But me? I just smiled. Because I had one. The rest of the wedding was a disaster. My parents stormed off right after my speech. Emma? She was furious. She pulled me aside, eyes blazing. You just ruined my wedding, she hissed. I shrugged. I just told the truth. You were so pathetic, she spat. I chuckled. And you are now officially the most expensive mistake I've ever made. She looked like she was about to throw her drink at me. So I did the smart thing. I walked out. Danielle followed me, laughing the whole way. That was legendary, she said. I smirked. And worth every penny. The second I walked out of that wedding, it felt like a weight had been lifted. For years, I had let my parents and Emma treat me like a walking ATM. But now, I had flipped the script. And they couldn't stand it. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Mom left me a 3-minute voicemail, switching between sobbing and yelling. You humiliated us, Alex. Do you know what people are saying? Dad was more direct. You're an embarrassment. You'll regret this. And Emma? She just sent a single text. Emma, hope it was worth it. I stared at my phone, laughing. Because you know what? It was. A few days later, I got a call from a very angry wedding planner. Mr. Alex, your parents have informed me that the remaining balance for the wedding is still outstanding. I blinked. Excuse me. Yes, she continued, sounding annoyed. The payment for the final invoices was declined. Your parents assured me that you were covering the cost. My jaw dropped. These people had the nerve to try and bill me again. Even after everything. I laughed out loud. Oh, I'm sorry, but that's not my problem. She hesitated. But your parents said, I don't care what they said. I never agreed to pay a single cent. They lied to you. So, you might want to take that up with them. She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a much colder voice, she muttered, Understood. I hung up, smirking, because I knew exactly what was about to happen next. Later that night, my mom called again. This time, I answered. How dare you refuse to pay, she shrieked. I rolled my eyes. Oh, so now you need me? This isn't about needing you, Alex. It's about doing the right thing. You agreed to pay for the wedding. I smirked. No, Mom. I agreed to pay if my conditions were met. And guess what? You and Emma never followed through. So that deal? You were ruining us, she howled. No, I said calmly. I just stopped letting you use me. Then I hung up. Because this time, I wasn't their safety net anymore. The moment I hung up, I knew this wasn't over. My parents? They weren't the kind of people to just accept defeat. They had spent years treating me like a financial backup plan. And now that I had cut them off, they were going to fight to get that control back. A few days later, Danielle and I were out for dinner when I got an email from my bank. At first, I thought it was a fraud alert. But then, I read the subject line. Transaction dispute, $35,000 chargeback request. I blinked. What on earth? I clicked the email. My parents had tried to reverse the original wedding payments, claiming I had agreed to reimburse them. They had gone directly to my credit card company, saying the charges were supposed to be in my name. Danielle looked over my shoulder. They wouldn't. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, they absolutely would. The next morning, I called my bank. The rep was polite and professional. Sir, we received a chargeback request stating that the wedding charges should have been covered by you. We just need to confirm whether this claim is accurate. I smirked. No, it's not accurate. In fact, I have written proof that I never agreed to pay anything. She paused. Oh, that changes things. I forwarded the emails I had with my parents, the ones where I clearly stated I was only paying if my conditions were met. Then, I added a final note. If they continue trying to commit fraud, I'll be happy to escalate this legally. Within an hour, I got another email. Chargeback request denied. Funds will not be returned. I grinned. And just like that, their last-ditch effort to manipulate me had failed. That night, my dad called. I let it ring. Then, my mom. Ignored. Then, Emma. Blocked. Because at this point, I was done. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are struggling because of you. I stared at the screen. Because even without a name, I knew it was Emma. She still thought she could guilt-trip me. That I would feel bad and magically make this all go away. So, I typed out a response. Me, actions have consequences. Maybe next time, don't steal from family. Then, I blocked the number. For good. Blocking Emma's number felt like closing the last chapter of a book I should have put down years ago. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their burdens. I wasn't their financial backup plan. I was free. The fallout from the wedding hit them hard. With no one to bail them out, my parents had to pay off everything themselves. Their unexpected financial troubles got a whole lot worse. Word spread fast through the family. Relatives started asking questions. Why were my parents struggling so much? Why did they expect me to cover Emma's wedding? And most importantly, why did I cut them off completely? I didn't have to say a word. Because the truth? It spoke for itself. Weeks passed. Then months. Life got quieter. No more sudden calls demanding money. No guilt trips. No last-minute family emergencies. I focused on my own life, my career, my marriage, my future. And it felt amazing. One night, out of nowhere, I got an email. From my mom. The subject line? Can we talk? I stared at it for a while. Then, I opened it. It was short. Too short. Alex, we miss you. Let's move on from this. Family is more important than money. I scoffed. Because there it was. No apology. No ownership. Just another attempt to rewrite the narrative. Like I was the one who needed to move on. Like they hadn't tried to manipulate me, lie to me, and steal from me. I sat there, thinking about how I wanted to respond. Then, finally, I typed 2 words. We can't. And I hit send. Because for once, I was putting myself first. A year later, my life was better than ever. I bought a house, traveled, focused on the people who actually cared about me. And my parents? I don't know. I don't check. I don't care. Because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. And it was the best decision I ever made.